My name is Catherine Wilson. I'm 29 years old. I work in graphic design, and up until a few months ago, I would have told you I had a pretty decent relationship with my older sister. Her name is Camilla, 32. Growing up, we were never the closest, not rivals, not enemies, just two people living in different emotional climates under the same roof. She was the golden girl, the varsity star, the one who could glide through life with effortless confidence and still manage to win our parents' unwavering approval. I was the quieter one, the artistic one, the sister who doodled in the margins while forgetting deadlines, the creative one a compliment wrapped in pity. Still, despite our very separate worlds, things were manageable, polite, lukewarm, but steady. And then, strangely enough, things got better. A few years ago, Camilla went through a brutal breakup, emotionally draining, financially messy. She wasn't used to falling apart, but she cracked then. And for the first time, as adults, we connected beyond forced holiday small talk. Around the same time, she was building her real estate side business. I designed her logo for free, a tiny gesture that somehow thawed a decade of ice between us. She invited me out for drinks, more often joked that we were finally acting like real sisters in our 30s. It felt nice, unexpected. I thought we were turning a real corner. Then she met Evan. Evan Carter, too. Charming, grounded, thoughtful. Not the loudest guy in the room, but the kind whose presence steadied the air rather than pushed it around. Smart, warm, observant. He had this way of listening that made you feel like your words mattered. I liked him immediately again, not romantically. No inappropriate spark, just genuine respect. He was good for her, or so I believed then. But the real surprise wasn't Evan. It was his ex-girlfriend, Emily Rhodes. She was luminous. That's the only fitting word. A person who walks into a room and lifts the temperature a few degrees just by breathing. Funny, bright, effortlessly kind. The kind of woman who remembers things you said in passing and brings them up weeks later like they were precious facts worth storing. We met at a family dinner. Emily sat across from me, and somehow, without planning to, I spent most of the night talking to her about art, graphic novels, music, and inspiration. She told me she used to sketch in the corners of her high school notebooks. She asked questions, real ones, not small talk. She made me feel seen in a way few people ever have. When I left that dinner, I thought I'm truly happy for Camilla. She's found someone who brings good people into her orbit. Apparently, that was the beginning of the problem. It started small. Camilla would make little comments harmless on the surface, but with edges if you read between the lines. Didn't know I was bringing my boyfriend to Comic-Con, she'd joke after Emily and I chatted about an art exhibit. Or, you two talk like you've been friends for years, followed by a stiff smile and eyes that didn't match. At first I brushed it off. Sisters tease. It's normal. But then came the evening everything shifted. Camilla invited me over for a small game night, just her, Evan, and me. We ordered Thai food, played code names, somewhere between wine glasses and a humiliating loss on my part. Emily nudged me playfully with her elbow while laughing at my disastrous clue. It was innocent, completely harmless. But Camilla's smile didn't reach her eyes. A few minutes later, she excused herself to the kitchen. She stayed there longer than necessary. When she returned, something in her had cooled, hardened, even though she was smiling again. Later, as I slipped on my shoes to leave, she tugged me aside into the hallway. Her voice was low, controlled. You don't have to try so hard to be funny around her. I blinked confused. What I wasn't trying. Emily, it's not a competition. You don't have to entertain her every second. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a strange joke. I wasn't competing Camilla. We were just talking. Her expression didn't change. Don't overstep. That was it. The first crack in the ground beneath us. I left feeling like I'd accidentally stepped into someone else's argument, but I backed off anyway, just in case. Over the next few weeks, I declined some invitations, responded slower to texts. When I did see them, I kept my conversations with Emily short and surface level. No more deep dives into art. No lingering jokes. No comfortable chatter. But none of it helped. Camilla still watched me with a tight, simmering suspicion, like everything I said was part of a plot she'd invented in her mind. Then came the real blow. Camilla and Emily announced their wedding, a small, intimate ceremony in early May. Emily sent out gorgeous handmade invitations, wax seals and all. I waited for mine. It never came. At a Sunday lunch at our parents' house, I casually asked Camilla if mine got lost in the mail. She didn't even look up from her phone. You're not invited. I froze, thought she was joking. What? She finally raised her eyes. You're not coming. My mouth went dry. Camilla, I'm your sister. She sighed like I was draining every ounce of her patience. Emily and I agreed. It's better if you're not there. Why? She stood tossing her napkin onto the table. You think I haven't noticed the way you two act around each other? She lights up every time you're in the room. You make her laugh more than I ever have, and everyone sees it. I stared at her, stunned. She's being nice, Camilla. She's just friendly. She smiles too much when you're around, she snapped, eyes sharp. And you know it. So do us both a favor, stay away. Stop trying to steal her. A concrete block dropped into my stomach. I couldn't speak. I just grabbed my jacket and walked out without saying goodbye. And that's how, for the first time in my life, my own sister looked at me, not as family, but as a threat. I spent the day of their wedding alone. Not dramatically, not with wine bottles or tear-stained pillows, just quietly, deliberately disconnected. I muted every notification, avoided social media like it was toxic gas, and let the hours pass without counting them. I didn't know the venue. I didn't know the guest list. I didn't know whether Emily's smile that day would be real or forced. All I knew was that my sister believed I was the problem, and she wasn't hesitating to cut me out of her life to protect her fiction. A week later, almost to the minute, everything shattered. It was near sunset, the sky dimming into bruised gold, when a slow, uncertain knock touched my door. The kind of knock that carried hesitation, desperation, and apology all at once. I opened it and froze. Standing on my doorstep was Emily Rhodes, in her wedding dress. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, eyes red and swollen, her hair undone falling around her shoulders in tangled waves. She held her heels in one hand and a crushed bouquet of white roses in the other. Dirt smudged the hem of her gown. She looked like she had walked straight out of a heartbreak and hadn't stopped running until she reached me. For a few seconds, she didn't speak. She just stared at me, with trembling lips and glassy eyes, breathing hard, like she wasn't sure she was standing on solid ground. My mouth moved before I could think. Camilla's jealousy ruined everything. I told you it would. Her face broke. Not just into tears, into something deeper, something like relief mixed with devastation. Can I? She swallowed. Voice cracked raw. Can I come in? I stepped aside wordlessly. Emily entered my quiet apartment in her torn wedding dress barefoot, leaving little ghost-like marks of dirt and rainwater across the hardwood floor. She looked impossibly fragile against the backdrop of my IKEA furniture and scattered sketchbooks. When I closed the door, it felt like locking the outside world away. Her world, Camilla's world. The world that just collapsed. She stood in the middle of my living room like she didn't know how to exist anymore. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. What happened? My voice came out gentler than I intended. Her breath shuddered. He lost it, right after the ceremony. I blinked. So it happened. You two actually got married? Barely, she whispered. Emily sank onto the edge of my couch like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. I sat opposite her on the ottoman, leaning forward. She stared at the floor as she spoke, like looking up might break her open entirely. At first, I thought it was nerves. Some people get weird before big events, right? But Camilla, her voice faltered. She made me block you 2 days before the wedding. Emily continued. Said if I hesitated even for a second, I clearly didn't respect the relationship. My stomach twisted. She said she saw the way I smiled around you, Emily said quietly. She thought the only reason I ever looked happy was because of you. Emily, I swear. I know, she cut me off softly. Catherine, I know. You never did anything wrong. You were kind. You listened. That's it. And that's what scared her. She lifted her eyes, and the pain there nearly made me look away. Right before the ceremony, I found her pacing in one of the dressing rooms, she said. She was muttering to herself, shaking. When I asked what was wrong, she snapped. She said she saw the way I looked at you when you dropped off that engagement gift. I blinked. What engagement gift? The sketch, Emily said. The framed one of us at the art museum. The one I poured 2 nights of sleep into. The one Camilla never acknowledged. I'd meant it as a gesture of support, nothing more. I never imagined it would become evidence in some paranoid fantasy. Emily exhaled, shaky. I tried to calm her down, she whispered. Told her we could talk after the ceremony, that we should just focus on the day. But the moment the officiant pronounced us married, and we walked away for our first dance, she swallowed. Camilla accused me of thinking about you. A cold wave washed over me. She said I was imagining your face while she was holding my hands. Emily rubbed her arms like she was freezing. She said she knew my smile wasn't really for her. I sat in stunned silence. Not because I believed Camilla's accusations, but because I finally understood how far her jealousy had burrowed into her mind. She told me to stop pretending, Emily whispered. That pretending was cruel. Her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't trust myself to speak. You didn't do anything wrong, Catherine, she said. Again, barely audible. This wasn't you. This was her. I was just too scared to admit what I'd walked into. We sat like that in the dim living room or in a ruined wedding gown, me trying to hold on to composure until her body slowly curled into itself like a child weathering a storm. Eventually, she fell asleep on my couch, wrapped in one of my blankets. I stayed up the whole night in the armchair across from her, listening to the soft, uneven breaths of someone whose life had just collapsed, half expecting Camilla to pound on my door, half expecting the universe to punish me for simply existing. But morning came quietly, and when I woke, my neck stiff from the chair, Emily was gone. The blanket was folded neatly. The crushed bouquet lay in my sink like discarded evidence. No note, no message, not even a goodbye. Just the faint scent of her perfume lingering like a ghost. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, my mother called, her voice clipped and cold. What did you do to your sister? The accusation hit like a slap. What, Mom? I didn't. She says you sabotaged the marriage, that Emily ran away because of you. I felt heat rush to my face. She's the one who banned me from the wedding, I snapped. I didn't even go. But Mom wasn't listening. No one was. She wants to cut contact, Catherine, my mother said. She says she's done. That you don't respect boundaries. Boundaries. The word tasted like poison. By the end of the day, the truth was clear. My family had chosen Camilla's version of the story. Without question, without hesitation, without me. Within a week, I wasn't just excluded. I was erased. I didn't realize how quickly a person could disappear without dying. At first, it was small things. My sister Danielle stopped texting me funny memes at midnight. My father stopped sending me articles he thought I'd enjoy. The family group chat went from active chaos to silent on my end. Not because the conversation stopped, but because I had stopped receiving any messages. The reality hit slowly like a dimmer switch, fading the light one notch at a time. My parents hosted Sunday dinners without me. My cousins posted photos from gatherings I hadn't been told about. Camilla's voice, her story, became the default version of the truth. And I was the convenient villain. It was stunning in a sickening way how efficient the erasure was. No confrontation, no messy arguments, just quiet omission. My phone stopped buzzing, my notifications dried up. I became a ghost still breathing, and the world kept turning without me. The message that broke me came late one night. An email from Camilla. No greeting, no sign-off. Just, stop contacting Emily. You've caused enough confusion. As if I were some obsessed homewrecker, desperately clinging to someone else's spouse. As if I had been the one barging into their wedding. As if she hadn't shown up at my door in her ruined gown. I deleted the email so quickly, I nearly slammed my finger into the trackpad. Then I stared at the blank wall where I'd once hung the framed sketch I'd made of them. I'd taken it down 2 days earlier, not because I hated it, because looking at it felt like staring into a lie I had accidentally participated in. That night was my rock bottom. Not because Camilla said something cruel, I had grown numb to that, but because of how I felt reading it. Nothing. No outrage, no grief, no burning need to defend myself. Just a hollow, exhausted emptiness. That kind of numbness terrified me more than any heartbreak ever could. I sat on the couch in the dark, listening to my own breath, trying to gather the energy to stand up, to move, to do anything other than sit in the void Camilla had carved in me. I didn't know what made me do it, but after what felt like hours, I reached for a blank notebook on the coffee table. I opened to the first page and wrote 5 words. This is not where it ends. The sentence wasn't brave, it wasn't angry, it wasn't even confident. It was a spark, a whisper of resistance, a tiny flicker of defiance in a darkness that had swallowed everything else. The next morning, I forced myself to shower at the same time I used to before all this started. It felt mechanical, but I did it. I cleaned my apartment. Not out of motivation, out of desperation. If I could control nothing else, I could at least control the clutter. I made actual meals instead of eating cereal or crackers. They tasted like nothing, but I ate them anyway. Then slowly, tentatively, I began to draw again. Not the polished, clean-lined pieces I used to make. Not cheerful commissions, but raw, jagged emotional shapes, pain given physical form, faces haunted by betrayal, silent mouths screaming, eyes that refused to close because they'd seen too much. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. And honesty for the first time in months felt like oxygen. One night, after hours of pouring myself into a self-portrait that came out darker and more torn than I expected, I scanned it and posted it anonymously to a digital art forum I'd joined years ago. I expected nothing, but the comments began trickling in. Haunting in the best way. This feels like depression. Thank you for showing it. I'd hang this in my living room as a reminder that I survived something. I stared at those comments, stunned. These were strangers. They didn't know my family. They didn't know the lies. They didn't know me. But they saw me. Not as Camilla's insecure shadow. Not as the villain of a story I didn't write. Not as the sister who made Emily smile too much. Just as a person. An artist. Someone whose voice had value. For the first time in months, my throat tightened with something that felt almost like relief. The next day, I uploaded 5 more pieces. Then 10. Then older work I'd forgotten I even made. My anonymous inbox started filling with messages asking if I sold prints. So I created a tiny online shop. Simple, bare bones. I didn't expect anything. But in the first week, I made enough to cover groceries. In the second week, double that. A therapist's office from Portland reached out wanting a commissioned set of illustrations for their waiting room. Your work gives people permission to feel complicated emotions without apologizing, the email said. I cried after reading that. Not because of the money, though it helped, but because finally, after everything, someone saw me without Camilla's shadow blocking the light. While I was rebuilding myself, I kept silent. Didn't contact Camilla. Didn't contact Emily. Didn't check social media. Didn't ask mutual friends for updates. I let distance grow like a protective moat around my heart. But numbness didn't fully fade. Because underneath all the healing, a quiet truth kept pulsing. Camilla had pushed me out. She had lied. She had cast me as the villain in her story, and no one questioned her. Not once. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. What I wanted was clarity, truth, an acknowledgement that I had been wronged. I didn't know it then, but that clarity was coming. And it would arrive on a rainy Thursday evening in the form of a woman standing at the mouth of my building's alleyway, drenched to the bone. Emily Rhodes, looking like someone who finally saw the truth, and couldn't run from it anymore. Rain dripped from the ends of her hair, her hood half fallen, her eyes wide and unsure, like she wasn't certain I would still recognize her, or worse, still care. Catherine. Her voice broke on my name. I stood frozen for a heartbeat, groceries dampening in my hand. Then, despite every warning bell in my chest, I stepped aside. Come in. She walked into my apartment like someone bracing for impact. Her clothes were soaked straight through. Her hands trembled as she peeled the wet hoodie off. I offered her a towel. She took it with a small, shame-soft nod. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, distance between us heavier than the storm outside. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she inhaled shakily. I owe you an apology. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. Emily wrung the corner of the towel between her fingers, staring down into her lap as if the truth lived somewhere in the seams. I know how it looked, she whispered. The photos, the caption, the comments. I kept my voice neutral. You posted them. She shook her head slowly. No, I didn't. I turned toward her, genuinely taken aback. Emily swallowed hard. Camilla wrote that post, on my account, while I was asleep. The room tilted for a second. She wrote the caption, uploaded. The photo, replied to every comment, pretending to be me. Emily's voice cracked. She said it would prove that I was loyal, that I chose her. My chest tightened. And you let her, I asked. She flinched because she deserved to. I didn't know until the next morning, she whispered. And by then, everyone had already seen it. Everyone was praising us. And I didn't know how to undo it without making everything worse. So you stayed silent, I said. She nodded, eyes glossy. I was scared, she admitted. And I didn't understand how trapped I really was until I saw what she was doing to me, and to you. I stood up, pacing because my body couldn't contain the hurt. Emily, everything was already blown up. Everything. And you let me stand alone in the rubble. Her face crumpled. I know, she said, voice breaking. And I'm so sorry. I crossed my arms tightly. What changed now? She looked up at me, really looked, and I could see the exhaustion carved into her bones. I saw your work, she whispered. The sketches, the pain in them. The truth in them. Catherine, you were drowning because of a lie I knew existed, and I said nothing. She wiped a tear roughly with the heel of her hand. I never meant to hurt you, or to choose her narrative over yours, but I was lost, and I didn't know how to leave her without setting myself on fire. The storm outside thundered, vibrating the windows. Tell me, I said quietly, what do you see now? Emily took a slow breath. I see someone who built something beautiful in spite of everything she said, someone who refused to disappear even when she was pushed out of her own family, someone who deserves better than any of the lies told about her, someone free. Her voice trembled on the last word. For a moment, just a moment, my heart softened, but softness didn't erase what happened. I shook my head. I'm not ready to forgive you. A single tear slipped free, but she didn't wipe it this time. I don't expect forgiveness, she whispered. Just honesty. If you ever need someone to tell the truth about what really happened about Camilla, about the wedding, all of it, just say the word. She stood slowly gathering her damp clothing, holding the towel like armor. At the door she hesitated. Catherine, Camilla's jealousy didn't just ruin the wedding. Her voice dropped to a fragile whisper. It almost ruined you. And I let it happen. I won't let her silence me again. Then she opened the door and stepped back into the storm. This time I didn't stop her. But something fundamental had shifted subtly, quietly, but real. For months, Camilla's version of the story had been the only one anyone heard. Now, for the first time, I wasn't the only keeper of the truth. And truth, I realized, is heavy, powerful, dangerous, especially when someone has spent their whole life controlling the narrative. Emily left the storm, swallowing her footsteps, but she left a fracture in Camilla's story that could never be sealed again. Not by lies, not by silence, not by force. And I wasn't ready to use that truth yet, but I would be soon. Over the next week, something changed in me. I didn't rage, I didn't crumble, I didn't plot revenge. Instead, I began sorting through old messages, not for ammunition, but for clarity, a timeline, a pattern. Little things I once brushed off now shone like warning signs under a black light. The joking comments that weren't jokes. The invitations I forgot to receive. The way she isolated Emily before isolating me. The subtle digs disguised as sisterly concern. The narrative she shaped long before the wedding. Camilla had not just lost control. She had been building control for months, maybe years. I saw it clearly for the first time. And I also saw her weak point. She needed everyone to believe her version of reality. She needed to be the sun everyone revolved around. And she needed me to remain quiet. But I wasn't quiet anymore. So it wasn't surprising, though, it felt like fate when my phone rang one afternoon and my cousin Jenna's name lit up the screen. We hadn't talked in months. Catherine, she said brightly, I have a favor to ask. You still do commission work. I hesitated. Yeah, why? I'm organizing a charity gala for the Arts Education Fund. We're looking for a feature artist, someone whose work captures emotional resilience, someone whose art has been going viral anonymously. She paused for dramatic effect. And I told them I might know that person. My breath caught. And Jenna continued excitedly, they want you to headline the exhibit, under your real name. A perfect crack in Camilla's porcelain world. The kind truth flows through. I'll do it, I said quietly. You're serious, Catherine, this is huge. But I was already somewhere else, already envisioning the gallery walls, already forming the piece that would split open the truth with charcoal and light. A portrait, a veil, a shadow trying desperately to cover someone else's brightness. A story told honestly at last. The truth was coming, and this time it would be hanging on every wall. The minute I hung up with Jenna, my apartment felt different, charged electric, as if the walls themselves knew something was shifting. For months I'd been pulled backward, drowning in other people's narratives. But now the current had flipped. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building. The charity gala was exactly 1 month away. 1 month to curate an entire exhibition. 1 month to decide how loudly I wanted to tell the truth. And I knew immediately I wasn't going to whisper. I started with the piece that had lived in my mind long before I admitted it to myself. Smiles too much. Charcoal on heavy stock paper. Grayscale. Texture rough enough to feel like sand under the fingertips. A woman in a wedding dress face glowing mid-laugh, untouched by fear. And behind her, a shadowed figure, blurry, faceless hands, reaching toward her veil as if desperate to drag it over her light. It wasn't Emily, not exactly. But if you knew the story, you'd feel the sting. It was a portrait of jealousy made flesh. Control trying to smother joy. A person who believed someone else's light dimmed their own. Camilla without being Camilla. Truth without using her name. I worked on it until my fingers cramped and my shoulders ached. I layered the shadow again and again, darker each time until it felt like it was breathing on the page. When I finally stepped back from it at 3 a.m., my heart thudded with something sharp and certain. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. From there, the rest flowed. A series of raw portraits, women, men, silhouettes captured at the moment of breaking or awakening. A figure pressing their palms against glass, the words, "Why wasn't I asked?" faintly etched into the background. A faceless crowd turning away from one central figure, their outlines smudged, disappearing. A woman standing alone in a spotlight, shadows reaching for her ankles like chains she had chosen to step out of. Every piece had emotion baked into it, grief, betrayal, resilience, release. And every piece told a part of my story. The story no one cared to ask me for. Buzz began building before I even realized how far my work had spread. One small art blogger posted a teaser about the mysterious viral illustrator headlining a charity gala under her real name. Then another. Then a local journalist reached out for a pre-event interview. I didn't realize how big the moment would be until the event website updated. Featured artist Catherine Wilson, exploring emotional rebirth through shadow and light. My hands trembled reading it. For the first time in months, my name wasn't tied to a lie. It was tied to something mine. 3 days before the gala, I received an email from Emily. No greeting, no explanation. Just, I heard about the show. I'll be there. Not with her. I stared at the message for a full minute before closing it. I wasn't angry, and I wasn't relieved. I just didn't need it. This show wasn't about her, wasn't about Camilla, wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was about me stepping out of the shadow I had lived under since childhood. Whether Emily showed up or not changed nothing. Still knowing she'd seen the truth in my art, enough to break away from Camilla's gravity, left a quiet warmth in my chest. A flicker of vindication, a breath of vengeance-free closure. And then fate struck one more time. I ran into Camilla. Literally. I was leaving a meeting with the event coordinator when I heard her voice sharply cut through the street noise. Catherine. I turned. She stood there in her tailored blazer, posture, rigid expression, carved from porcelain. Standing beside her was a man I didn't recognize, probably a client, but the way he awkwardly stepped aside told me he felt the strain between us instantly. Camilla approached. You look busy, she said, tone-flat eyes, scanning the portfolio, tucked under my arm. I am. No apology. Her gaze flicked downward, resting on the edge of my sketch of smiles too much peeking from my folder. She lifted her chin. So you're still doodling? I smiled faintly. No, Camilla, I'm exhibiting. Something flickered in her eyes, fear maybe so fast she almost hid it. Emily said she saw something about you online, she said casually, but her jaw tightened. I didn't ask. Camilla stepped closer, lowering her voice so the passerby wouldn't hear. You think a few charcoal tantrums make you special, she hissed. You think this little show is going to fix your reputation. I met her gaze calmly. No, it's going to tell the truth. Her nostrils flared. What truth? The truth you spent months twisting, I said. The truth you silenced everyone with. She scoffed. Please, you've always needed attention. I leaned in, not threatening, just steady. Well, you're going to get plenty of it at the gala, whether you like it or not. Now the panic surfaced, brief but real. You wouldn't dare. I stepped back with a soft smile. You don't get to tell me what I dare anymore. And then I walked away. No yelling, no theatrics, no dramatic exits. Just clean, undeniable control. Something she had never let me have, not once in our entire lives. The next 48 hours moved like a pulse, sharp, accelerating electric. Invitations poured in. More RSVPs, more shares, more whispers about the piece. I didn't respond to them. I didn't need to. The truth was already moving on its own. The night of the gala was coming, and with it, the unraveling. The evening of the gala arrived without theatrics. No thunderstorm, no cinematic rain, just a soft spring breeze brushing against the glass entrance of the gallery. The air hummed with quiet anticipation, a kind of reverent stillness, wrapped in jazz music and murmured conversations. Inside, warm lights glowed across exposed brick walls. Champagne glasses clinked softly. Guests drifted from artwork to artwork. Donors, art lovers, journalists, with press badges tucked into suit jackets. My name, Catherine Wilson, was printed elegantly on the event programs my bio displayed on a plaque near the entrance. For the first time in my life, people were entering a room, not despite me, but because of me. I stayed toward the back at first observing. People paused at each piece. They tilted their heads. They whispered. They felt something. And then they reached the centerpiece. Smiles too much. The spotlight hit it just right. Soft haunting. Illuminating the veil. The light behind the bride's eyes, the dark hands tugging at the edges of her joy. It commanded attention. A woman in a navy dress stood frozen before it, hand over her mouth. It's devastating, she whispered to her partner. Another guest murmured, this one hurts. Beautifully. Their reactions washed through the room like a ripple effect, hushed reverent, almost worshipful in the way people honor truth when it reveals itself gently but unmistakably. I watched it all quietly, my heart steady and strange in my chest. Then I saw her. Emily. She walked in alone, wearing a simple black dress, hair down, face bare of anything but honesty. She moved through the crowd without looking for anyone, not for me, not for Camilla. She knew exactly where she was going, straight to the centerpiece. She stood in front of it for a long time, her chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths. Even from across the gallery, I saw the exact moment she recognized the shadow, what it represented, who it represented. Her shoulders softened, her eyes closed. She exhaled like she'd been holding something in for months. Then she turned, found my gaze across the room, and smiled. Not brightly, not apologetically, just genuinely. A soft, steady acknowledgement of the truth between us. Then she turned and walked out into the night, alone, freely, decisively. For the first time, she didn't look back. And then, like the universe had been waiting for its cue, Camilla entered. She stepped into the gallery with her usual polished confidence, chin, high heels, clicking across the floor like she expected applause. But beneath the veneer, her posture was tighter than usual. Her eyes flicked around the room, assessing, grasping. Hunter-like. She was searching for weakness, searching for me, searching for control. She didn't find any. She approached the nearest group, pretending to greet donors. Her smile was stiff, her laugh too sharp. She couldn't relax, couldn't settle. Because the truth was here, hanging on the walls she couldn't control. And then she saw it. The centerpiece. Her steps faltered. A curator, a young woman with round glasses and a notepad, approached her warmly. "This is our headline piece," she said proudly. "It's called Smiles Too Much. It's been getting the strongest emotional response of the night." Camilla stared at the artwork. Recognition, panic, rage, all flashed across her face in the span of 2 breaths. The curator continued, oblivious. "The shadow is particularly fascinating. People interpret it as—" But Camilla cut her off. "What is this supposed to be?" she hissed. "We leave interpretation up to the viewers, but—" "Oh, I know exactly what it is," Camilla snapped, stepping backward, eyes darting around for me. She found me. Her jaw tightened until the muscles twitched. She stormed toward me, heels striking the floor like gunshots. "You think this is funny?" she spat, voice low but furious. I met her gaze calmly. Which part? That she gestured viciously toward the painting, the veil, the shadow behind her, your little metaphor. A few guests nearby turned subtly to listen. I kept my voice soft. "It's the truth, Camilla." She stepped closer. "You made me into some kind of villain." "You made that easy." Her nostrils flared. "You did this to humiliate me." "No," I said gently. "I did it to stop your lies from being the only story anyone hears." A couple behind her froze mid-sip. Someone lifted their phone just slightly, enough to capture the moment. "You've always needed attention," she whispered bitterly. "And you've always needed control." Her face reddened. "This is childish, Catherine. You think anyone cares about your sad little drawings?" I raised a brow, gesturing subtly toward the crowd. "Apparently they do." Brows furrowed, eyes watched, phones hovered. And for once I added, "They're hearing my voice, not yours." That landed hard. Her mask cracked just for a heartbeat. I saw it: fear, recognition, the beginning of unraveling. A curator approached carefully. "Is everything all right here?" "Yes," I said smoothly. "Just catching up with my sister. She's actually one of the inspirations behind this exhibit." The curator blinked. "Oh, I didn't realize." I smiled. "She prefers to stay behind the scenes." The gallery murmured. Camilla's breath hitched. She looked around, truly looked, and realized the moment was gone. Her hold over the room, over her narrative, over me, was shattered. And she couldn't salvage it. Not here, not now, not in front of witnesses. She spun on her heel and stormed out of the gallery alone, shoulders rigid, head bowed, ever so slightly. It was the first time I had ever seen her leave a room without owning it. The fallout began the next morning. My inbox filled like a dam breaking. Cousins, aunts, even Danielle. They apologized, some directly, some clumsily. I had no idea. "I'm so sorry we didn't ask for your side. We believed her so easily." My Aunt Lydia wrote, "We let her version define you. Your art finally showed us the truth." I responded kindly but honestly. I didn't absolve anyone. I didn't sugarcoat the hurt. But I didn't close the door either. Because grace was for me now, not for them. Emily never messaged again. But 2 weeks later, her Instagram updated. A photo of her holding a mug on a balcony. A quiet new apartment behind her. Caption: peace. Finally. No tags, no explanations. Sometimes silence speaks louder than confession. As for Camilla, her desperate online post accusing me of exploiting a family misunderstanding for attention got 8 likes. 8. And one of them was her former mother-in-law. 2 weeks later, word spread that her business had lost 2 major clients, one of whom had attended the gala. Apparently the truth leaves marks. Sometimes literal, sometimes emotional, sometimes charcoal on a canvas. I kept making art. More shows. A podcast interview. A cross-country feature. A bigger apartment with windows that finally let the light in. And my family. They tiptoed back into my life carefully, cautiously. Some I welcomed, some I kept at a distance. Because once you've been painted as a villain and survived it, you get to choose who deserves your light. Camilla never apologized. She never will. But she no longer controls the story. Not mine, not Emily's, not anyone's. And standing there months later in my sunlit studio, surrounded by pieces born from pain and truth, I finally understood. Some people destroy themselves trying to be the only sun in the sky. And they forget the moon shines brightest once it stops orbiting them. I never planned on rebuilding my life, not really. In the earliest days after losing my family, after losing my place among people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, I didn't imagine a version of myself that looked whole, steady, bright. But healing has a way of sneaking in through the cracks quietly at first, then with momentum you can't ignore. And somewhere between the late-night sketching sessions, the gallery crowds, and the unexpected messages from strangers who understood me more than my family ever had, I stumbled into a life that finally felt like mine. My new apartment was smaller than my last, but the windows were huge, tall, and wide enough to swallow every morning sunrise. Light spilled across the floor like it was trying to make up for all the darkness I'd lived in. My art studio filled one corner of the living room. Stacks of charcoal, unfinished canvases, a floral mug perpetually stained with tea. And my sketchbook, the same one I'd written in on my worst night, now thick with pages of work that had carried me back to myself. Sometimes I'd flip to that first page. This is not where it ends. It felt prophetic now. But at the time, it was just a whisper from a girl who wasn't ready to disappear. The weeks after the gala were quieter than I expected. My phone buzzed steadily with new opportunities, another commission, a podcast request, an invitation to a collaborative exhibit upstate. But the chaos, the drama, the panic that used to hold my life hostage, gone. Instead, there was clarity, room to breathe, room to grow. The people who reached out with apologies, genuine or otherwise, were met with measured grace. Not because I felt obligated to forgive them, but because carrying bitterness felt too heavy now. I'd lived under the weight of someone else's jealousy for too long. I wasn't going to drag another anchor behind me. But forgiveness didn't mean access. Some cousins I let back in slowly. My Aunt Lydia, who had written the most sincere apology, I met for coffee one morning. We talked for hours. She cried. I didn't. Not out of coldness, just certainty. Then there were others, the ones who had parroted Camilla's narrative without hesitation, without ever asking for my truth. The ones who had happily deleted me from their lives before the ink was even dry on Camilla's lies. Those doors stayed closed, not locked, just unnecessary. Even boundaries can be an act of healing. Camilla, though, she stayed silent. We didn't speak. We didn't text. We didn't orbit the same social circles anymore. Every now and then, I'd hear a secondhand update. She's been struggling to keep clients. She's quieter lately. She avoids talking about the wedding, about Emily, about you. But I didn't cling to those updates. I didn't need to. I had spent my whole life reading her emotions like scripture, careful not to offend, not to overshadow, not to take up too much space, not to breathe too brightly. I didn't owe her that anymore. For the first time ever, Camilla had to sit in the consequences of her own narrative, a story she twisted so tightly that it finally snapped back on her. And the most poetic part of all, I didn't lift a finger to destroy her. The truth simply existed, and that was enough. As for Emily, she didn't reach out again. I didn't expect her to. I didn't need her to. But sometimes when scrolling late at night, I'd see a quiet photo on her feed, sitting alone in a coffee shop, walking her dog at sunset, apartment balcony plants thriving under her care. She seemed peaceful. Not perfect, not whole, but free. And that was enough for me. I wasn't expecting the moment that finally made everything click, the moment I realized this entire story wasn't about Camilla or Emily or the family who abandoned me. It happened one evening when I was preparing pieces for the next exhibit. The sun was setting, casting warm orange light across my studio space. I was flipping through my old artwork pieces created when I was hiding, breaking, gasping for breath in a world that didn't want me to exist outside the lines Camilla drew. And then I found a sketch. A simple one, unfinished, bare, a self-portrait I'd drawn in those early numb days, eyes hollow, mouth tight, shoulders hunched as if bracing for an impact. I held the page gently, the charcoal smudging my fingertips. Then I flipped to the most recent piece, colorful, bold, full of movement and life. A woman standing in the middle of a rising tide, unafraid of being swept away. The contrast between the two took my breath away. That was it, the quiet revelation I didn't know I'd been waiting for. I hadn't just survived Camilla, I'd outgrown her. Her jealousy, her control, her narrative, it wasn't mine anymore. Never had been. I had stopped orbiting her the moment I told my own story, when I took back my voice, when I hung my truth on a gallery wall for the world to see. I was no longer the sister who made Emily smile too much. I was the woman who reclaimed her own name. The woman who built a life out of shadows and turned them into art. The woman who stepped into the light without asking permission. And that more than anything was the ending Camilla never saw coming. Not revenge, not vindication, just liberation. I closed my sketchbook, gently placed it on the table, and stood in the warm glow of the setting sun, steady, certain, whole. This wasn't where my story ended. It was where it finally began.